about a couple of those potential problems that people have run into. Here are two examples of how medical device manufacturers were able to overcome those. So the first one I touched on, we're looking at a lack of supplier oversight. So this would be a case where a diagnostic instrument manufacturer was getting reagents from an OEM. These reagents ultimately were being relabeled and were not being relabeled. They were being private labeled for the device manufacturer. And the assumption by the company was that all of these labels were meeting the standards. When they looked at the barcodes, they could see that they were printed nicely. They even scanned them with the phone and they scanned fine. But what they didn't ever do is actually look at the data. And what it turned out is, while from the view of an operator that doesn't really understand GS1, the data looked encoded correctly, but actually they put little parts to the code, parentheses where there shouldn't be parentheses. They forgot a function one character at the beginning that actually made it not a GS1 code. And if anybody with a system that was designed to scan GS1 codes, which phones are not, you would get the data and it would be incorrect. And so what they started doing is, anytime they signed on a new OEM to private label products for them, they ran them through a process with an offline verifier. In this case, it was R9580. And this would allow both the supplier and the device manufacturer to, know right off the bat that all the labels are correct. And then that would go into a database and be saved off. And anytime a new batch would come in, they would check those. And it was around a 10% error rate. And this was, around 5 years ago when they were running into this, before they introduced the new 9580 offline verification that can check for that. The second one was an internal issue, but it was a globalization issue. So multinational medical device manufacturer on the instrument side of the world was looking to handle the COVID situation where factories were being shut down and they needed to be significantly more flexible. Especially, one thing that COVID taught us is that at any given time, a specific product may have hyper demand. And if we're not set up to be able to handle that hyper demand, then we're going to miss out on business. And so they wanted to be able to take a line that typically ran, let's say, in the United States, and be able to double production by shutting down a line in, let's say Germany or Costa Rica, and continuing to run that line with the same products that were being made in the US. In order to do that, yes, making the products is one thing, but the labeling and the packaging is a whole nother thing that often gets overlooked. And in this case, bad labels were coming in. Even though it was the correct information, they were poorly printed. And, everybody wanted to point fingers. No one was taking responsibility. And ultimately, a inline solution like the B275, which Dustin will demo next, was able to allow a small team that stayed on their main site in the US to manage label creation and label quality globally. They were able to create the templates in a label management system to make sure the data was good. And then they were able to create the inspection templates using the B275 and just push them out to all of their facilities. So it went from something that was difficult and had potential pitfalls and problems to something that they could actually speed up production. So it really allowed them to make these changes without having to worry about whether first systems would come and be incorrect and have to be relabeled. So being able to do that automated sense and drive all of the creation and standardization from one site was a huge boon for them. So just a couple examples. Ultimately, what we've been talking about here is, all of the problems that could go wrong with the label. Ultimately, there's two pieces of equipment that we wanted to show you today. Dustin will start with the V275, and we can talk a little bit about the 9580 if we have time. But these are the inline and offline verifiers that will get you compliant and have all the tools to make compliance easy for UDI.